Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere hot, dusty, and more chaotic than you'd expect. The age of the Crusades. You're not a king or a knight in shining armor. No. Tonight you're just, well, you. Except you've got a heavy wooden cross strapped to your back, and someone called a bishop told you it was time to march for God. You've never left your village before. You don't even really know where Jerusalem is. But you said yes anyway. That's what people did back then. Say yes to things they couldn't pronounce. Before we begin tonight's journey through history, I have a small favor to ask. If you're enjoying this peaceful corner of the past, please consider giving the video a like or subscribing to the channel so you won't miss any of our upcoming nighttime adventures. It truly helps this little channel grow, and it means so much to me. If you're still awake enough to type a few words, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. I find it so heartwarming to see history gently unfolding across time zones, quietly shared together. I sincerely hope this historical story is gentle enough to ease you into sleep. But there's always a small risk. It might be too interesting. And if you do happen to stay awake through the whole thing, at least you'll walk away with a bit of new knowledge. And if that's what keeps you up tonight, well, I'd say that's worth it. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up before the sun rises? That's not unusual for your time. The 11th century doesn't exactly come with a snooze button. But today feels different. Today, you're leaving the only place you've ever known. The thatched roof homes, the cow with the limp, the priest who smells like onions and doesn't blink enough. All of it. You're leaving it behind with a cross tied to your back and the words Deus vult echoing in your ears. God wills it, or so they say. The road out of your village is more of a muddy rut than anything else. You step over a wheel rut filled with brown water and hope it's just water. The bishop handed you a crude map yesterday, but it might as well be a drawing of a dragon sneezing. It tells you nothing. Really, except that south is the direction of salvation, and also, conveniently, blistered feet. You're not alone. Others from your village are coming too. Some are barefoot, some are armored, and one man, Bernard the pig farmer, brought a goose. No one asked him to bring a goose. He just did. And now it waddles beside him like a feathery squire. That's how disorganized this so-called holy war is. People are marching off with frying pans and birds. The priest gave a stirring sermon before you left. Something about reclaiming the Holy Land and washing away sins. But mostly you remember the part about indulgences. If you make it to Jerusalem and survive, you're supposedly guaranteed a spot in heaven. It's the medieval version of a loyalty card. You walk through fields still wet with dew, then through other villages where people stare at your cross with wide eyes. Some join the march, swept up in the excitement or guilt or both. One woman gives you a stale turnip and tells you to pray for her cousin who owes her money. You nod, unsure how that fits into divine justice, but tuck the turnip into your bag anyway. As the sun climbs, your feet begin to ache. The road gets harder, dusty. The occasional corpse of a mule reminds you that this isn't just a hike, it's a gamble. You pass wagons with cracked wheels, peasants already weeping, and a monk shouting at a chicken. Historians still argue whether this part of the journey was more pilgrimage or panic. It's hard to tell when you're in it. Midday hits, and the heat feels like a sermon of its own. Your clothes, which once smelled like hay and soap, now smell like you. The sweat stings your eyes. You long for shade, but the nearest tree looks like it gave up on life around the time Charlemagne did. So, you trudge on. A knight rides past on a tired horse. His armor shines only because someone probably spit-shined it. He doesn't speak, just nods as if to say, "Yes, peasant. Enjoy your slow death march." You consider yelling something clever, but realize your tongue has fused to the roof of your mouth from thirst. There's no grand strategy, no central command. You're told to follow the road south and to stick close to groups that seem like they know what they're doing. Spoiler, none of them do. One group gets lost in a barley field for 2 hours. Another thinks they're in Syria when they're actually just outside Dijon. Still, you press on. Because what else is there? Home isn't an option anymore. Not with your family waving you off like you were going to the fair. Not after your younger brother took your boots and claimed your bed the moment you left. That traitor. You share a bit of bread with a stranger who calls himself Peter the Silent. Which is ironic because he talks constantly. He tells you stories about saints and visions, and that one time he saw a fish with 3 eyes. You nod politely while wondering if dehydration is contagious. Night falls like a stone. You find yourself sleeping under a wagon with 3 other pilgrims and a dog that no one admits owning. The stars are strangely bright. There's no comfort, no certainty. Just the sound of someone snoring like a dying accordion, and the realization that this is only day 1. And yet, there's something oddly peaceful in the exhaustion. You're part of something bigger than yourself. Something confusing. Sure, possibly misguided, definitely uncomfortable, but bigger. A great tide of muddy boots, whispered prayers, and half-eaten apples, all heading to a place you can't picture, in a time you barely understand. Tomorrow, your feet will blister, your turnip will freeze solid, and Bernard's goose will probably stage a mutiny. But for now, you close your eyes on a road to Jerusalem and hope the next village has soup. You wake up to something poking your back. Not a sword, not a spear, just a boot. Someone's muddy boot has found its way under your ribs in the night, and you groan as you roll over, wincing at the ache spreading through your legs. You slept on a patch of dirt so uneven it may have been designed specifically to test your patience. And every joint in your body seems to be complaining in unison. Your eyes blink open to the sight of pale morning light filtering through thin fog. Someone's already arguing about bread. Another is singing, badly. And Bernard's goose is waddling over to investigate your blanket, looking deeply untrustworthy. It's your first official morning as a crusader. And the glamour. Well, it never arrived. A grizzled man with a thick beard and even thicker accent barks something about formation, though no one seems to agree on what that means. The so-called leader of your ragtag group, a minor noble named Lord Geoffroy, is off relieving himself behind a tree, which is about as inspiring as it sounds. You put on your shoes, damp from last night's dew, and sling your makeshift pack over your shoulder. Inside, one hunk of bread, a knife you sort of inherited from a cousin, and a note from your mother telling you to keep your chin up. You think about that as you trudge behind a mismatched column of pilgrims, peasants, soldiers, and people who may or may not just be tagging along to sell things later. Your armor, if you can call it that, is a borrowed tunic over a scrap of boiled leather. It creaks when you move, and underneath, your shirt is sticking to your back in the most unpleasant way. You pass a group of better-equipped crusaders, likely knights from the Rhineland, who ride on well-fed horses and look at your group like your livestock with opinions. The road today is rockier than yesterday. Your ankles twist more than once. Dust kicks up into your nose, and you sneeze so hard you almost fall over. But you keep going. Everyone does. That's the thing about a crusade. No one's sure where it's going, but nobody wants to be the one who stops. By mid-morning, the sun is already pressing down like a judgment. Your lips crack, your neck burns. Someone hands around a wineskin, and it tastes like old socks. You drink anyway. Hydration is hydration, even if it might give you visions. Around noon, the group pauses at a stream. It's shallow and sluggish, but it looks like heaven. You splash your face, cupping the water in your filthy hands. A boy dips his whole head in. He comes up gasping with a leech on his cheek, and the entire group collectively decides to drink a little more carefully after that. Lunch, if you can call it that, is bread so dry you could hammer a nail with it. You gnaw at the crust, letting it soften slowly in your mouth. A fellow pilgrim, a woman named Marta with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, shares a few pickled onions wrapped in a cloth that smells faintly of something medicinal. You thank her, and she shrugs as if to say, "You're not dead yet." After lunch, the climb begins. It's not a mountain exactly, more like a relentless series of hills pretending not to be one. Each time you reach the top of a slope, another rises ahead, steeper and meaner than the last. Your legs feel like wet rope. The cross on your back digs in with every step. And just when you think your knees might give out, the wind shifts, and you smell something unexpected. Smoke. Someone shouts from ahead. A village. Not a big one, more like a few huts and a wooden fence. But it's clear that trouble passed through here. The buildings are scorched, the air still holding the bitter tang of burnt wood and something darker. Lord Geoffroy struts forward like he's going to issue commands, only to trip over a chicken carcass. No one laughs. It's not funny. You find a well that hasn't been poisoned. A miracle. A few crusaders pull buckets up greedily. Someone spots a half-buried wooden statue of the Virgin Mary and insists it's a sign. Another insists it's firewood. They argue, but ultimately agree to leave it alone. You notice a charred cradle against the wall and quietly step away. The group sets up camp just outside the village ruins. Tents go up, if you're lucky enough to have one. Most just find a patch of ground that's less sharp than the rest. You settle in under a tree that drops sap on your shoulder at regular, infuriating intervals. Dinner is whatever was left from lunch, now harder and somehow sadder. Bernard offers boiled goose eggs, though the look on the goose's face suggests the arrangement wasn't consensual. That night, as stars shimmer faintly overhead, you begin to understand just how hard this is going to be. You've barely started, and already your legs feel like soggy breadsticks. Your back is one long complaint, and worse. Your stomach won't stop making noises like an angry choir. Somewhere in the dark, a song rises. Someone is singing, softly, off-key, but earnestly. The tune is old, something from your childhood maybe. A lullaby for the road. One by one, others join in, quietly, just enough to forget, for a moment, that you're covered in dust and surrounded by strangers. Historians still argue whether the early crusading bands were brave or foolish, pious or opportunistic, but they rarely talk about how sore your feet would get, or how every step forward feels like trying to push the sky with your shoulders. You lie on your side, The cold earth against your cheek. The stars overhead do not blink. You wonder if Jerusalem is even real, if this isn't all some grand illusion built from sermons and marching songs. You're too tired to care. Sleep doesn't come easy, but eventually it comes. Tomorrow, you'll march again. It's hard to tell what wakes you first, the dampness crawling up through the earth, or the sound of someone retching behind a cart. Either way, your eyes open to darkness, the kind of darkness that doesn't have edges, only textures. The stars are still scattered overhead, indifferent and cold. You're not sure how long you've slept. An hour, maybe 2, not enough. Your mouth feels dry and sour. You shift slightly, and every joint protests. Your shoulder is numb from lying on a root. Something crunched when you rolled over, and you pray it was just a beetle. Someone nearby is snoring like a broken forge bellows. And worse, the air has that thick, too warm smell of sweat, wet leather, and unwashed humanity. This, you realize, is what sleeping on the road to Jerusalem means. You sit up slowly. The fire has burned down to a few orange embers. Shapes move in the shadows, others stirring, relieving themselves, whispering prayers. You pull your cloak tighter, though it doesn't help much. It's more whole than fabric now. The night is damp, and your blanket, such as it is, feels like a sponge. Somewhere nearby, a horse whinnies, then silence, then a low, drawn-out groan from a man with a stomach that clearly regrets whatever it ate. You try not to think about your own dinner. The onion and hard bread are still turning slowly in your gut like two enemies locked in a duel. You lie back down and stare up at the sky. You count stars. Then you try counting sheep. But the only sheep you can picture are the ones back home. And now you're thinking about home. Your mother's bread. The way your brother always claimed the warm spot by the fire. Even the priest, with his wandering eye and sermon breath, feels like something you'd trade a lot to see right now. A sharp rustle yanks you back to the present. You freeze. Something, or someone, is moving just beyond your camp circle. You can't see much, only the vague outline of a figure slipping between the sleeping bundles. It could be a thief. It could be a curious animal. It could be Bernard looking for his goose again. You almost call out, but the figure moves away, quiet as a thought. You hear nothing else. Just the wind sighing through the trees and the occasional crackle of someone shifting in their sleep. You close your eyes again. You try to sleep. You really do. But your thoughts have become loud. Too loud. Every noise is amplified in the night. The rustle of cloth, the creak of boots, the whispered groans of 100 bodies packed into a makeshift camp. And your own body doesn't want to rest. Your muscles twitch, your knee pulses, and your feet. Dear saints, your feet feel like 2 sacks of gravel stitched to your legs. Then there are the dreams. When you finally drift off, they come at you sideways. Strange, vivid things. You're marching through sand that turns into snow. The cross on your back turns into a door. You open it, and inside is your old kitchen. But everyone's wearing armor and eating fish with their hands. Bernard is there too, but he's the Pope. It's ridiculous. And yet, somehow, it feels no stranger than the day you just lived. You wake with a start. Again. The fire is out now. Nothing but faint, glowing coals. The darkness presses close. You hear someone muttering in Latin, not praying, just mumbling in their sleep. Somewhere. A dog barks once, then goes quiet. A baby cries for a few seconds, then is hushed. You don't even remember seeing a baby before. It's strange how quickly exhaustion becomes normal, how quickly discomfort stops being a problem and becomes just the way things are. You're not comfortable. You're not even rested, but you're getting used to this, to the ache in your spine, the damp in your socks, the constant noise. And when the first hints of morning creep across the sky, a hazy blue wrapped in mist, you're already half awake, already bracing yourself to move again. People stir, someone coughs, and then three more cough in response, like a song nobody likes but still knows. You sit up, feeling every bruise from last night. You wipe your face with a cloth that smells faintly of vinegar and smoke. Someone walks past with a frying pan and a stick of meat that looks more optimistic than edible. You look around and realize several people are missing, gone in the night. Maybe they deserted. Maybe they wandered off. Maybe they became food for wolves or fell into a ditch or just kept walking and never looked back. You don't ask. No one asks. The silence fills in the gaps. You pack your things, what little there is, and help lift a cartwheel that's stuck in the mud. Lord Geoffroy stumbles out of his tent looking like he slept in a well. He barks orders at no one in particular, and then complains loudly about how stiff his knees are. Someone starts singing again, the same off-key pilgrim from yesterday, and the sound is weirdly comforting. Not because it's good, but because it means you're still part of something. A strange, mismatched, footsore something. You rise, sling your pack over your shoulder, and take your place in the slow-moving wave of people heading south. The road stretches ahead, muddy and uneven, cutting through forest and field like a scar. You glance behind you, a habit you're developing, and realize how far you've already come. The village is gone. The river is behind you. The burned-out houses are just memories now. You're not a soldier, not really, but you're marching like one. Historians still argue whether the average crusader really understood what they'd signed up for. Most probably didn't. Most were like you, tired, sore, confused, and just trying to stay upright. As your feet press into the earth again, you try to remember what day it is, how long you've been walking, whether Jerusalem is still hundreds or thousands of miles away. You don't know, but you march, because that's what everyone is doing, because it's easier than stopping, because even in this mess, with all the noise and the stink and the pain, there's a kind of rhythm to it. And so you keep moving, keep hoping, keep waiting for something, anything, to make it feel worth it. Maybe it's still coming. The sun has been rising for what feels like hours, hanging just above the trees like a glowing coin you can never spend. Your feet are already sore, though you've only been walking since dawn. The mud along this stretch of road is stickier than before, almost as if the earth itself is reluctant to let you go. Your boots squelch and slurp like wet bread, and with every step, the straps of your pack dig a little deeper into your shoulders. Ahead, someone shouts, not in panic, not yet, but with a sense of urgency that tightens your chest. You pick up your pace as the road begins to narrow, flanked by jagged rocks and low, scrubby bushes. A few scouts, real ones, not just overconfident farmhands, wave their arms and point. And then, just like that, you see it. A city, well, more like a fortress pretending to be a city. Thick stone walls rise from the landscape like the spine of some sleeping beast. Flags flutter from the towers, too far away to make out their symbols. The wind carries the faint sound of bells, Not the joyful kind, either. Warning bells. You've arrived at a siege. You're not sure how you feel about that. The others are buzzing, murmuring about tactics and saints and fire. Some clutch their weapons tighter. Others look around as if hoping someone will tell them this is a mistake. Lord Geoffroy rides to the front, his horse visibly irritated, and starts issuing commands that sound suspiciously like guesses. "Form ranks," he bellows, despite the fact that no one here knows what that means. The city gates are closed, of course. Why wouldn't they be? And from the walls, figures watch, soldiers in turbans, archers with bows, a man in robes standing just so, hands calmly folded. The defenders don't look frightened. That's what unsettles you the most. They look patient. Your group is not a disciplined army. It's a mosaic of enthusiasm, desperation, and questionable hygiene. Some men chant, others joke too loudly. One man is oiling his sword with what smells suspiciously like goat fat. As you settle into your assigned spot, somewhere near the back, but still too close to the front for comfort, you hear a hissing sound, then a scream. Someone up front clutches his face and collapses. You see steam rising from his helmet. A black smear on the ground begins to spread. Boiling oil. They're pouring it from the walls, and it's not even noon yet. Your stomach flips. This isn't a battle yet. It's just a warning. You duck instinctively as a rock thuds into the dirt beside you. Another flies overhead and smacks into a man beside Lord Geoffroy. The poor soul topples off his horse, his helmet bouncing away like a kicked kettle. Geoffroy doesn't even look down. He simply nudges his horse sideways and clears his throat. Someone nearby crosses themselves. Another pulls out a bottle of holy water and begins flicking it in wide arcs over everyone's heads, mumbling Latin so fast it comes out like a spell. You get a splash in the eye and hope that counts for something. The noise builds, not from the city, but from your own side. Whispers, panicked prayers, clanking gear. A few archers step forward and fire arrows, which float through the air and harmlessly ping off stone. One arrow does hit someone, unfortunately, one of your own, square in the calf. You start to realize that the danger isn't just the enemy, it's everything. The heat, the confusion, the complete and utter lack of coordination. A knight with a red scarf around his neck shouts for ladders. "Where are the ladders?" he cries. Someone responds. "We had ladders." And now they're arguing about whether the ladders were left behind in the last village or if someone burned them for firewood. You sincerely hope that's a joke. There's a lull. Not silence, but a pause, as if both sides are waiting for the other to blink. You use the moment to sip from your water skin, which is warm and tastes faintly of metal. Still, it's something. A voice near your shoulder says, "First time seeing a siege?" You turn to find Marta, the woman with the pickled onions, eyeing the city with a hard squint. You nod. She gestures toward the walls. "You see that tower? Third one from the left? That's where they'll fire from next. They rotate. Watch and you'll see." You do, and she's right. The next volley of arrows comes from that tower. Quick, sharp streaks of death that make everyone duck, even if they land harmlessly 50 feet short. You suddenly wonder how long this will last. A day? A week? You've heard of sieges that went on for months, even years. The idea of sleeping on damp ground and eating dried beans for another year makes your spine shrink. The sun continues its slow climb. You sweat through your tunic. You get a second splash of holy water. You watch two men argue over whether they're supposed to be praying or charging. No one knows. No one ever knows. A priest stands in the center of your group and begins singing, loud and clear, a song about salvation and glory. His voice is good, better than expected. People around you join in, quietly at first, then louder. The melody rises over the field like a strange mist, and for a moment, it almost feels like order, like belief. Then someone screams again, a soldier from another company running back with his sleeve on fire. And the moment is over. A horn sounds from the city walls. Deep, hollow, final. It echoes across the landscape and settles in your chest like a stone. The attack begins. Men surge forward with shields and ladders, yelling battle cries that sound more like wishes. Arrows rain down. You stay in the back, clutching your blade, unsure whether to pray or pretend to be asleep. Someone behind you mutters, "It's fine. We're just meant to apply pressure. No real fight today." You want to believe him, but you can't. You glance at the city once more. It looks unchanged, untouched, as if it's not even worried. And you've never felt smaller. Historians still argue whether boiling oil was truly common or just a colorful legend. But when you see the skin melt off a man's face, you don't argue. You just nod and try not to vomit. You grip your sword tighter, even though your arms ache and your heart is thumping like a drum. This is only the beginning, and there is no turning back. The next morning, the field looks like a camp built by people who've never agreed on anything. Tents sag to one side, horses are tied to trees, wagons, and in one case, a man who fell asleep holding the reins. Fires smolder lazily, barely hot enough to cook, though that doesn't stop someone from trying to boil soup in a dented helmet. You sit on a rock chewing hard bread and trying not to think about the man who lost his fingers to the oil yesterday. His scream still echoes in your ears. Lord Geoffroy has not emerged from his tent, which is, frankly, a problem, because everyone is waiting for someone to say what happens next. You look around and realize you're not the only one glancing toward that sagging flap of canvas. A few knights stand near it, arms folded, muttering to each other in low voices. One gestures with his sword, not menacingly, just theatrically, like he's explaining a point about chickens. The priest from yesterday is there too, looking increasingly frustrated as his words are ignored in favor of a man with a feathered cap and no visible armor. A boy runs by carrying a scroll twice his height and yelling that the papal legate says we must fast until we are victorious. Someone hurls a turnip at him. You rub your temple. Your stomach is empty and your sword is dull. And the city walls still loom in the distance, unbothered. The only progress made so far was digging a shallow trench, which a goat promptly fell into this morning. The goat is fine, a little shaken, maybe the only one here who is. Finally, Lord Geoffroy appears, stretching as though he just awoke from a particularly restful nap. His hair is disheveled, and his chainmail is halfway on, giving him the appearance of a nobleman trapped inside a kitchen sieve. He waves vaguely toward the east and says something about repositioning the camp, though no one is entirely sure why. The confusion only deepens as more orders come in from higher up, or, at least, from people claiming to be higher up. One knight insists that a letter from the King of France grants him full authority over the camp. Another insists he's seen a vision of St. George telling him to lead a flank charge at dawn, even though no one has a plan. a flank, or the energy. The bishop, meanwhile, is arguing with a merchant over the price of wine, which the bishop insists should be free since it's clearly blessed. The merchant disagrees, loudly, with hand gestures. You watch them go back and forth and begin to wonder if Jerusalem will still be there when they're done. By mid-morning, 3 different people have claimed leadership over your unit. First, it was Lord Geoffroy, who wanted everyone to march in tight formation, a concept that collapsed the moment someone stepped on a loose chicken. Then it was a monk named Father Roland, who attempted to lead a prayer march around the siege line until a group of archers pointed out that walking in circles made them easy targets. Then a man named Ulrich declared himself captain of morale and began handing out dried figs. He didn't last long. The figs were rancid. You find Marta again, sitting under a tree sharpening a dagger on a flat stone. She nods at you and says, "They're going to keep arguing until someone actually dies," in a very dramatic way. You ask if she means one of the commanders. She shrugs. Could be, or the goose. Either would spark action. She's not wrong. Around noon, Lord Geoffroy holds a council, which is really just a circle of people yelling. Someone suggests tunneling under the city. Someone else suggests catapults, even though no one has one or knows how to build one. One man just yells, "Fire!" repeatedly until someone points out that shouting it doesn't actually make it appear. It's around this time that rumors start spreading. You hear murmurs of reinforcements coming from the south, or maybe the east, or possibly not at all. Someone insists a nearby village has secret maps of the city. Another swears he saw a spy last night disguised as a goat. No one is sure who started these stories, but everyone repeats them as if they were gospel. As the day wears on, the heat grows heavier, and the weight of uncertainty presses down harder than any armor. You begin to understand that leadership in this crusade is more like a suggestion than a structure. There are titles, there are banners, there are seals and scrolls and men shouting, but none of it leads to clarity. What it does lead to is miscommunication. One group builds defensive trenches, another fills them back in, thinking they're trash pits. A squad of archers fires into what they think is the enemy camp, only to discover they've just destroyed a supply cart full of bread. You watch a knight give a rousing speech to the wrong group entirely. They clap anyway, mostly because they thought it was a hymn. Historians still argue whether the early Crusader leaders were tactical geniuses or simply good at yelling louder than everyone else. But from where you sit, hungry, sunburned, and covered in a thin layer of dust and holy water, the answer feels obvious. You see Lord Geoffroy later that afternoon, riding past on a new horse that someone insists was borrowed from a nearby monastery. He doesn't wave. He just looks vaguely annoyed, as if leadership is a burden thrust upon him by fate and bad luck. He's followed by 2 squires and a servant carrying what appears to be a small barrel of wine. You lie back in the grass and stare at the sky. Birds circle above the city walls, free to fly in any direction. You envy them. You close your eyes and wonder what would happen if you just walked away. Right now, into the trees, no speeches, no banners, just silence. But you don't, because something, maybe pride, maybe fear, maybe the simple fact that your boots are already pointed forward, keeps you here, in this confusion, in this mess, in this crusade that no one seems to truly be in charge of. You shift your pack beneath your head and let the low murmurs of disorganized command wash over you. Somewhere, Someone is blowing a horn. No one responds. It's going to be a long siege. You're not sure what time it is when the dinner bell rings. Mostly because there is no dinner bell. Just a man with a pot, banging it with a spoon and yelling, "Hot stew!" even though no one believes it's actually hot. Or stew. Still, people gather around, drawn more by the hope of calories than by any real expectation of flavor. Hunger is persuasive like that. You rise slowly from your patch of flattened grass, brushing off what may be half a beetle and something else that crunches ominously. Your legs feel like splintered wood, and your stomach has started to make noises that sound like distant thunder. It's been hours since you've eaten anything that even vaguely resembled food. The last thing you had was half a fig, not because you like figs, but because it fell into your lap when Ulrich the morale captain tripped and dropped his stash. You never did find out what happened to him. The stew line, as people are now calling it, snakes between tents and carts. At the front stands a man in a greasy apron, sleeves rolled up, ladling out something from a dented cauldron. He has the look of someone who once had culinary ambition, but has long since surrendered to whatever ingredients reality offers. You catch a whiff of something. Meaty, smoky, slightly medicinal. Marta joins you in line, sniffing the air suspiciously. "That smells like goat," she says. "Or dog." She squints. "Maybe both." You try not to think about that. You're not proud. You're not picky. You're just hungry. When you reach the front, the cook eyes you with a blank expression, says nothing, and slops a ladleful into your wooden bowl. It splashes slightly. A chunk of something bobs to the surface. You poke it gently with your spoon. It doesn't move, which you take as a good sign. You sit beside a dying fire with a few others and taste your first bite. It's salty. Incredibly salty. As if the meat had been brined in ocean water and regret. The texture is chewy. Like boot leather, with notes of mystery, no one speaks. Everyone eats in silence, like people attending a somber ceremony. A priest wanders by, flicking holy water toward the cook pot and muttering a blessing. The cook doesn't look up, just keeps stirring. "Whatever this is," Marta murmurs between chews. "At least it's warm." You nod, and then wince. The nod somehow jars something in your neck that wasn't hurting before. Later that evening, a group of crusaders gather to listen to a traveling bard, a man who plays a harp with only 5 strings, and sings songs that sound vaguely familiar, but always end with someone noble dying dramatically. One such ballad involves a knight who falls in love with a Saracen princess, only to realize she's his long-lost cousin. The group claps politely. No one questions the logic. You lie back again, bowl resting on your chest, still half full of stew. You're not brave enough to finish. A few others nearby are playing dice, using bones they claim came from a blessed ox. Another is carving a crude chess set from firewood and muttering about strategy while chewing on a twig. There's comfort, oddly enough, in this shared strangeness. You're all exhausted, confused, sore in places you didn't know could be sore, but no one's alone in it. A sorta camaraderie has emerged, stitched together with jokes about trench foot and stories about whose pack mule is the smartest. As night falls, the wind changes. It carries the smell of the siege, burnin' wood, sweat, a hint of manure, and somewhere, someone roasting onions. The city remains silent in the distance. No horn calls, no arrows, just torches flickering along the walls, like watching eyes. They don't seem worried. You wonder if they're eating better than you are. Probably. Someone starts humming a tune, and another person joins in. The melody is simple, old. You don't know the words, but the rhythm is familiar, like something your grandmother might have sung while baking bread. You close your eyes for a moment and pretend you're home. But then a trumpet blares. Not a charge, not a warning, just a trumpet. Everyone looks around, startled. The sound came from your side, not the enemy's. Lord Geoffroy appears moments later, dismounting awkwardly from his horse and yelling about a new plan. Something about a feint or a feast. It's hard to tell. He's either very excited or slightly drunk. He calls for everyone to gather. Some pretend not to hear. Others groan and drag themselves toward the command tent. You and Marta linger near the edge, just close enough to hear the gist. "Tomorrow," Geoffroy announces. "We take the gate," someone asks. "How?" He pauses, looks around. With courage, another asks if ladders have been repaired. Geoffroy waves dismissively. "We'll improvise." A priest raises a hand. "Shall we fast tonight in preparation?" Geoffroy stares at him for a moment and says, "No, we've already been punished enough." There are murmurs, some amused, others annoyed, but no one openly disagrees, partially because they're too tired, and partially because no one really believes anything will happen tomorrow. You certainly don't. Not after yesterday's coordinated flank maneuver, which turned out to be two squires tripping over a tent peg. Still, just before turning in, you sharpen your blade on a flat rock, more out of habit than confidence. Your hands are blistered, your knees ache. You've started to name the bruises. The one on your thigh is Gerald. As you crawl under your blanket, which now smells permanently of salted stew and damp socks, you feel something hard beneath your bedroll. It's a rock, the same rock as last night. You named it, too. Bertrand. You sigh, roll over, and pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders. Historians still argue whether crusaders were sustained more by faith or by salt. Tonight, you lean toward salt. That stew is still sitting in your stomach like a brick, but a warm brick. And in this place, that counts for something. Tomorrow might bring battle, or boredom, or another rousing speech from Lord Geoffroy followed by absolute chaos. But for now, there's a kind of peace, not comfort, but quiet. And sometimes, that's enough. The morning comes with a sharp breeze and the muffled sound of two men arguing over a boot. Just one boot, the left one. You crack open one eye to see them tugging at it like it's Excalibur. A crowd has gathered. Wagers are being made. No one notices that a third man quietly walks off with the right boot while they fight. You sit up slowly, every muscle stiff from the night's rest. Or rather, the night's long, motionless negotiation with the uneven ground. Bertrand the rock is still beneath your hip. You consider moving him, but decide you've grown attached. At least he stays put. As you stretch your back and brush last night's stew crumbs off your cloak, you hear shouting in the distance. Not panic, not yet. Just complicated shouting. The kind of shouting that involves finger pointing and arm waving. You wander toward it, curiosity getting the better of you. Marta falls in step beside you, yawning and tying back her hair with a strip of torn cloth. You arrive to find two groups of crusaders standing across from each other like mismatched chess pieces. One group wears dark red tunics, stained and sun-faded. The other, wears blue sashes over their shoulders, and seems slightly more organized, if only in posture. At the center is Lord Geoffroy, gesturing dramatically with a rolled-up map. He's flanked by a knight you've never seen before, who looks like he could crush walnuts between his eyebrows. "Who are they?" you ask. "Burgundians," Marta replies. "Arrived last night. Think they know everything." You squint at the newcomers. They do look confident. Too confident. One of them is wearing polished boots, which feels like an insult somehow. Another holds a banner with an intricate crest you can't decipher. You catch snippets of the argument. "You promised us the northern flank." "We promised nothing. Your men sleep through horn calls." "At least our men wear pants." It goes downhill from there. The tension is more than just personality. It's hunger, exhaustion, a slow, creeping recognition that the siege isn't going anywhere, and everyone's looking for someone else to blame. The Burgundians think Geoffroy's troops are undisciplined. Geoffroy's men think the Burgundians are arrogant. You think both are right. By midday, a truce is declared, mostly because someone dropped the wine barrel and everyone agreed that was the real emergency. But the damage is done. Rumors spread, whispers about allies who might become rivals, about groups planning to break off, go their own way, maybe even negotiate with the enemy. You find yourself watching your fellow crusaders more closely. That night, your camp feels a little colder. Not just the weather, though that too has taken a turn, but the air between people, where once there were shared jokes and passable stew. Now there's silence and side glances. You notice your boots missing for a full 5 minutes before realizing they were drying by the fire. Still, the suspicion lingered. You sit near Marta, who's cleaning her dagger with what might be holy water, or just very clean wine. She doesn't say much at first, just stares into the flames. Then, you ever wonder who we're really fighting? You think about it. The enemy is in the city, sure, but they're quiet, patient. It's here, among yourselves, where the shouting happens, the bickering, the power struggles, the pettiness. The infighting is louder than the war. You nod. She sighs. "I've been in 3 different units since we started. One disbanded, one got lost, and one decided to follow a goat into the woods. I'm not even joking." You don't doubt it. Later, you try to sleep, but the whispers won't stop. Someone is talking about stolen rations. Someone else says the Genoese contingent poisoned a water barrel to weaken the competition. It's absurd. Probably, but you check your water skin anyway. Trust is a fragile thing on this road, and tonight, it's thinner than usual. The next day brings more tension. A minor noble named Sir Henry insists he's taking over camp logistics and immediately demands that everyone's bedding be moved 6 feet west. No one complies. One man pretends to comply by moving a pebble. Henry storms off. A squabble breaks out over firewood, then over latrine placement, then over the correct way to bless soup. The priest says clockwise. A knight insists counterclockwise. The cook just shrugs and dumps in more salt. You spend most of the afternoon helping reinforce the trench that's somehow become the only useful part of camp. You shovel dirt beside a man who introduces himself as Thomas, a carpenter from Bruges. He has one eye and a very strong opinion about which saints have the best sense of humor. "The key to surviving a crusade," he says while patting down the trench wall, "is assuming everyone else is wrong and keeping your spoon close." You laugh. But that night, your spoon goes missing. Historians still argue whether the divisions among crusading forces were political, religious, or just plain personal. Likely a messy swirl of all three. But what they often overlook is how quickly unity crumbles when faced with hunger, boredom, and too many commanders with too little food. By the end of the week, you've memorized the names of at least 6 different factions in your corner of the siege. Geoffroy's camp, the Burgundians, the Silent Brothers, the Fellowship of St. Giles, the Bohemians who refuse to speak Latin, and a splinter group called the Righteous Roosters. No one knows why. None of them agree on anything, except that Jerusalem is still far away, and that trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to sew back together with twine and prayer alone. That night, Marta finds your missing spoon. It had been stolen by a child who used it to catapult berries at pigeons. You thank her. She shrugs. I get bored too. You stare up at the sky, listening to the distant clink of armor, the creak of carts, the quiet laughter of men who've stopped caring whether they'll be friends tomorrow. Because tomorrow might be a fight, or a feast, or another petty argument over who gets to wear the only dry pair of socks. Either way, you'll need your spoon. You've left the walls behind, not conquered, not breached, not even really challenged, just left. Word came down that your group was being reassigned. The phrase used was strategic relocation, but you suspect that's just Geoffroy speak for we're giving up and hoping no one notices. Now the city is a silhouette in the distance, and the dust in your mouth tastes like disappointment. You're marching again, through unfamiliar terrain, south, or maybe east. No one seems quite sure, but everyone agrees it's away from the last disaster, and that's enough. The land has changed. No more shaded hills or half-damp meadows, just flat, cracked ground and long, dry wind. The sun feels different out here, less like warmth, more like punishment. You'd give anything for a patch of moss or a single cloud. Your feet ache. Your lips are splitting. The water in your skin feels like it's trying to escape. The group walks in silence now, too tired to argue, too dry to complain. Dust clings to your lashes. Your cloak, once stiff with dried stew and pride, now hangs limp like wilted lettuce. Even Marta is quiet, her mouth covered with a strip of cloth soaked in water, an old trick she swears works better than prayer. You try it. It helps. Slightly. The road is not really a road anymore, just a vague suggestion carved by travelers before you, a trail of ruts and sun-bleached bones. A dead mule lies off to one side, picked over by birds that scatter as you pass. You count 6 ribs before deciding not to look anymore. The worst part isn't the heat, it's the sameness. The way the landscape doesn't change, the way the horizon keeps lying to you, offering what looks like trees or water, only to twist into more mirage. You swear you see a tower once, but it turns out to be a rock and a shadow conspiring against you. Someone collapses. A boy, maybe 16, folds to his knees and tips sideways into the dust. His mother rushes over, but there's nothing to be done. He's breathing, barely, and someone gives him the last few drops from a canteen. Lord Geoffroy rides past and tells them to keep moving. The next village isn't far, he says. He's been saying that for 2 days. You pass an abandoned well, bone dry. Someone spits into it out of spite. Lunch is a strip of jerky so tough you consider using it to patch your boot. You chew and chew until your jaw clicks and then finally swallow. unsure if it's digested or just lodged permanently in your throat. You chase it with warm water that tastes like tin and regret. Marta breaks the silence with a hoarse whisper. I thought we were on a holy mission. You glance at her. She squints into the light. I thought we were doing something noble. You want to say something comforting, but you're too thirsty to lie. You walk. A priest stumbles beside you, his white robes now the color of baked bread. He tries to sing, voice cracking like old parchment, but the words crumble in the heat. A soldier behind him mutters, God should have picked a cooler land. That night, you camp beneath a rock outcrop, huddled for shade that barely exists. The stars blaze overhead, cruel in their brightness. You try to sleep, but the heat clings even after dark. Your blanket is useless. Your skin itches from the grit that never seems to wash off. You lie on your back and think about rivers, about rain, about the cool stone floor of your village church. You remember sneaking in as a child, lying beneath the altar just to escape the summer heat. You'd pretend the stone was ice. You'd close your eyes and float. You try to float now. It doesn't work. The next morning, someone is missing. A man named Elias, known mostly for making wine out of anything remotely squishy, has vanished. No note, no trace, just gone. Some say he wandered off to find water. Others think he snapped and ran back toward the city. You doubt it. The city is too far, and madness doesn't often come with a sense of direction. Lord Jeffroy holds a brief sermon. It lasts 2 minutes. He says something about perseverance and divine reward, then mounts his horse and rides ahead. You wonder if he believes any of it. His horse looks as tired as the rest of you. The landscape gets meaner, not just hotter, sharper. Stones now, jagged and loose. One wrong step, and your ankle could end the crusade for you. You see a man trip and catch himself on a cactus. He says nothing, just picks out the spines and keeps walking. That's where you are now, past complaining. You've learned a lot about pain this week, how it layers, how it changes, how it hums in the background, quietly reshaping your thoughts. You no longer think about winning, you think about surviving. That night, a storm rolls in, not rain, of course not rain, a dust storm. It comes fast, like a wall. Wind howling, sand flying. You dive under a cart, pulling your cloak over your face. The air stings your eyes and scrapes your throat. Somewhere, a man screams for his mule. Somewhere else, someone sings through the storm like it's a lullaby. You lose track of time. When it passes, silence falls again. The stars are gone. Even the moon looks tired. You emerge, coughing, your cloak heavy with dust. Everyone looks like statues. Sand in every fold, every seam, every breath. No one speaks. No one has to. Historians still argue whether this march through the desert was necessary, whether better planning or clearer routes could have spared lives. But in the end, the desert didn't care. It didn't care about plans or prayers or banners or saints. It didn't care about who you were or why you came. It just burned and waited and wore you down. You lie down that night on ground that's still warm from the day and try to imagine grass, just grass. You can't, but you try anyway. And finally, as your heartbeat slows and the sky turns silver at the edges, you think, if there's still a holy city at the end of all this, it better have a fountain. You wake to the sound of someone swearing at a saddle, a man's voice, loud and exhausted, arguing with a piece of leather as though it personally offended him. You don't open your eyes yet. The ground beneath you is gritty. Your throat feels like it's been lined with ash. And your dreams, if you even had any, were lost somewhere in the constant ache of your legs. The saddle wins the argument, judging by the thud that follows and the quiet mutter of defeat. When you finally sit up, blinking through a haze of sun and dust, you notice something you hadn't before. A group of women gathered near a wagon, tying bundles, boiling something in a battered iron pot, sorting dried herbs with practiced hands. They're not just along for the journey, they're working, organizing, managing. You'd barely paid them attention before. Not because they weren't there, they always were, but because no one talks about them in the sermons or scrolls. Yet, here they are, cooking, tending wounds, carrying packs, fixing gear with more skill than most squires. You watch as one of them yells at a full-grown knight for miswrapping his bandage. He apologizes, sheepishly. You recognize one of the women, Agnes, a tall, sharp-eyed widow from the town where you camped 3 weeks ago. You remember her because she'd sewn your cloak after it got caught on a cartwheel. She's walking among the soldiers now, carrying a satchel that smells strongly of garlic and vinegar, handing out something wrapped in cloth. When she reaches you, she presses a small bundle into your palm. "Chew this," she says, "for the dryness, and don't swallow the seeds." You nod, grateful. It's a bitter root of some kind, but it works. Your tongue feels like it might live through the day after all. Marta joins you a moment later, holding a steaming cup that smells medicinal and dangerous. "They're the reason half of us are still alive," she mutters, nodding toward the women. You watch as they tend to blisters, patch boots, refill water skins, and organize the next move like it's a village festival instead of a desert crawl. One of them even has a small wooden tablet where she's keeping notes. You ask what she's writing. She says, without looking up, "Who's sick? Who's missing? Who still has clean socks?" You're tempted to laugh, but you don't. She's not joking. That day, the march slows again, not because of the heat this time, but because one of the oxen collapses. Half the morning is spent redistributing supplies, arguing over who gets what, and trying to coax the other animals forward. Lord Geoffroy, as usual, offers nothing but commentary and a vague wave of his arm. While the men bicker, the women get to work. One manages to patch a snapped wheel using rope and a leftover piece of armor. Another distributes strips of cloth soaked in something cooling. Mint, maybe. It's hard to tell. Everything smells faintly of sweat and boiling meat. You see a girl no older than 12 walking with a clay jug on her head, steady as a saint, not spilling a drop. Behind her, a woman with arms like tree trunks carries a pack that looks heavier than your entire body. No complaints, no drama, just motion. You're starting to understand who's actually holding this crusade together. Later in the afternoon, someone falls, a young soldier from Burgundy who tripped over a stone and split his chin wide open. You wince at the blood, thinking surely he's out of luck. But before the priest can even reach him, 2 women are already kneeling at his side, dabbing the wound with wine-soaked cloth, wrapping his head with strips of linen like they've done it 100 times. They probably have. You end up walking beside Agnes for part of the march that day. You ask why she came. She doesn't look at you when she answers. "My husband left with the first wave, said he'd be back by spring. That was 2 years ago." She shrugs. "Figured if I couldn't stop him from going, I could at least find out what happened." You nod, unsure what to say. The sun catches her hair, threaded with gray. She walks with the pace of someone who's not in a hurry, but always arrives first, nearby. Another woman, older and nearly bent double, is instructing three younger ones on how to dry herbs in the sun without ruining them. One of them is arguing that mint and sage can be mixed. The older woman clucks her tongue. Only if you want stomach cramps and sleep so deep you don't wake up. You keep walking. That evening, at camp, the women take over once again. Fires are built, water is boiled, and someone even manages to make a sort of flatbread out of crushed grain and something that might be oil. It's chewy, but it's not stew, and everyone treats it like a banquet. You get 2 pieces and feel like a king. Later, a soft hush spreads over the camp. The sun has just dipped behind the hills, turning the sky into a smear of orange and purple. A lullaby floats on the air, low, sweet, haunting. Someone's singing. Maybe Agnes, maybe not, you can't tell. But the melody moves through the camp like a thread, pulling everyone closer to silence. You lie back with your hands behind your head and watch the stars come out. Historians still argue how many women were present on the First Crusade. Some say they were rare. Others say they were everywhere, just not recorded. But if you've learned anything today, it's this. Just because they weren't written down doesn't mean they weren't holding everything together. They march quietly, they heal quickly, they don't ask for thanks. And you start to realize that when the food runs out and the plans fall apart and the commanders forget what they were commanding, it's the women, with their cloth bundles and biting tea and blistered feet, who keep the whole mess from sinking. That night, Marta tosses you an extra blanket. Compliments of Agnes, she says. You nod, tell her thank you. Marta smiles. You can tell her yourself, but she probably already knows. The sun climbs higher than you thought possible, hanging over the dry landscape like it's mocking you. It's been weeks since you saw the city walls. Not the first city, that stone fortress you shuffled away from like a band of embarrassed beetles, but a new one, different, tall towers, broad gates, layers of fortification that suggest someone really didn't want visitors. And now, you're parked outside it, again, another siege. This one, they say, will be different, more strategic, better supplied. There are ladders this time. Actual ladders, not just long sticks with ambition. Lord Geoffroy insists that coordination is the key. He's said that 5 times today, each time while misplacing his gloves. But here's the truth you're starting to learn. Most sieges don't look like battles. They look like boredom. It's waiting, so much waiting. Waiting for supplies, waiting for orders. Waiting for something, anything, to break the monotony of dust, sweat, and the never-ending question, should we attack today? You rise each morning at dawn, not because you're told to, but because the sun hits your face like an accusation. You stretch, walk stiffly toward the nearest cook fire, and receive the same breakfast. Flatbread if you're lucky. Soup if someone found herbs. If it rained the night before, the soup tastes marginally better. You never ask what's in it. Then you wait, you patch gear, you sharpen your blade, though it barely sees use. You reinforce your tent with twine donated by a woman named Lisette, who claims to have once tied up a bear with it. You believe her. She has the look of someone who could wrestle a thunderstorm. Marta spends most of her time now helping dig. Not tunnels. No one trusts tunnels anymore after that cave-in last week. But trenches, latrines, waste channels, necessary work. thankless work. But it keeps your hands moving and your mind quiet. Every so often, a horn sounds from the city. You tense, grip your weapon, look toward the walls, only to realize it was ceremonial, or maybe mocking. It's hard to tell. Their soldiers appear on the ramparts now and then, watching silently. Sometimes they wave. One even bowed once. No one really knows what to make of it. And then, you go back to waiting. Your tent mates have developed new hobbies. One knits badly. Another whittles little birds out of discarded arrow shafts. You've started keeping a log of how many different kinds of stew you've eaten. 12, as of yesterday. You've given them names: brown surprise, gray regret, something that might have been onion. Some nights, there's music, not organized, just scattered singing. The kind that starts with one voice and slowly gathers others like dust. A song about Saint Martin. A marching tune from Flanders. A lullaby you half remember from your mother's kitchen. The melodies carry across the tents, giving shape to the nothingness. The siege continues. One morning, excitement spreads. Someone's cousin from a neighboring camp claims to have seen movement at the gates. Troop formations, possible surrender. Everyone lines up, watching the walls, waiting for a signal. Nothing happens. By sunset, morale dips even lower. That night, Geoffroy calls a meeting of captains and leaders. You're not invited, of course, but Marta returns with updates, arguments. Mostly, one group wants to charge, another wants to wait for reinforcements, a third wants to leave entirely and let the Lord sort it out. No decision is made. Days pass, weeks. The weather turns. The heat gives way to wind, sharp. Cutting wind that howls through camp like a bitter grandmother. Tents flap. Fires won't stay lit. Your cloak finally rips down the center, and you spend an entire afternoon stitching it together with Agnes's spare thread while she scolds a knight for using wine to clean his sword. You wonder if anyone even remembers why you're here. One morning, a new figure arrives. A monk in dark robes with a staff carved with tiny Latin inscriptions. He delivers a rousing sermon near the center of camp, gathering dozens. He speaks of endurance, of trial, of purification through struggle. His voice is low, firm, persuasive. You listen for a bit, then drift away. You've heard this one before. The walls still haven't moved. Your sword grows dull. You don't bother sharpening it anymore. The metal's worn so thin it bends slightly if you lean on it. You've started using it as a tent pole. Marta makes a joke one evening as you both watch the sun set over the silent towers. Maybe they're not even in there. Maybe it's just an empty city now, and we're all performing for ghosts. You laugh, then stop. Because what if she's right? Historians still argue how long some of these sieges truly lasted, whether records were accurate, whether the boredom was exaggerated, but none of them ever describe how time stretches, how a week becomes a month in your bones, how silence can feel louder than battle. There are small skirmishes now and then, a sortie, a raid, a misfire, but nothing decisive. You lose a few men, gain a few stragglers from other camps. No one really celebrates anymore. The victories feel abstract, like stories told by someone else. One afternoon, you climb a small hill just beyond camp, a place where you can see the whole city, the walls, the towers, the rooftops within. You stare for a long time, then close your eyes and try to imagine what's behind those stones. Are they afraid? Are they laughing? Are they just Waiting too? The wind shifts, and you catch a scent of baking bread from the city. Real bread, rich, yeasty, almost sweet. Your stomach groans audibly. Marta joins you, sniffing the air. Cruel, she says. That's just cruel. You nod. That night, someone steals a pig from a nearby supply wagon. No one admits it. But the next morning, half the camp smells like roasted meat and secrecy. Geoffroy flies into a rage. A whole meeting is called. Nothing is resolved. The pig is gone. And the siege continues. You dream that night of doors opening, of the city welcoming you in. You walk its empty streets, touch its stone walls, find a fountain in the center that flows with cool water. You kneel to drink, but the water turns to sand. You wake with your tongue dry and your eyes stinging. Marta tosses you a wineskin. Drink, she says. You do. Then rise, stretch, and march again. Toward another day of silence. Toward another day of forever. You hear it first thing in the morning. A low, panicked shout near the chapel tent. Then the rustle of too many feet moving too quickly for this early hour. You sit up, blinking through the haze of sleep and stale dust, already bracing yourself for another argument about soup rations or stolen boots. But this isn't about food. This is about something far more dangerous: faith. By the time you reach the edge of the crowd, the rumors have already started to ripple. The relic. The relic is gone, not just misplaced, not dropped or temporarily loaned out to another group. Gone. The toenail of St. Bartholomew, mounted in a tiny silver case shaped like a foot, has vanished. You hadn't thought much about the relic until now. It was always there, nestled in a padded box lined with blue velvet, occasionally paraded around camp during sermons, or strapped to a pole when things looked especially grim. People kissed it, prayed to it. One man even swore it stopped his nosebleeds. Now it's missing, and suddenly, everyone cares very, very much. You don't even make it to breakfast before accusations start flying. A merchant claims he saw a boy loitering near the tent just before dawn. A knight insists it was the Genoese. Because they've always been jealous. Someone suggests the Turks sent a spy disguised as a monk. Another blames the women, which earns him a bruised shin from Lisette and a public scolding from Agnes that leaves him red-faced and speechless. By mid-morning, the relic hunt has become an obsession. Lord Geoffroy calls a council of immediate investigation, which involves 6 men sitting in a circle pointing fingers while Geoffroy alternates between yelling and sipping from his personal wine supply. The priest who'd been in charge of the relic is weeping beside the empty velvet box, clutching a crucifix and mumbling prayers like they might reverse time. You spend most of the morning wandering camp, overhearing wild theories. Some believe the relic was taken by divine intervention, a sign that the crusade has strayed from its holy purpose. Others think someone pawned it to buy figs and strong wine. One man claims a raven swooped down and carried it off, guided by Satan himself. He's shouted down quickly, but the image sticks in your mind. Marta finds you near the supply tents, where a line of soldiers has formed, not for rations, but to offer testimonies. She hands you a dry crust of bread and rolls her eyes. "It's always a toenail," she mutters. "Never a finger, never a rib, always something tiny and impossible to verify." You smirk. "Think someone really took it?" She shrugs. "Probably. But the bigger question is, what happens now?" Because now, That's where things get dangerous. By noon, patrols are circling the camp, unofficial ones. Men who've taken it upon themselves to investigate every tent, crate, and cooking pot. Suspicion blooms like mold. Allies eye each other sideways. Conversations become quieter. The jokes stop. Someone throws a stone at a young squire, accused of hiding the relic in his saddlebag. He didn't. The bag held only socks and a prayer book. But by the time the mistake is realized, the squire's already bleeding, and the man who threw the stone is being tackled by 3 others. It takes 5 minutes to separate them. Agnes steps in, bandaging the squire's head and cursing the stupidity of men who think relics are more important than people. You want to argue, but you don't. You're not even sure she's wrong. Later that afternoon, a small group breaks away from camp entirely. About a dozen soldiers, 2 monks, and 1 woman who claimed she had a dream about the relic buried beneath a fig tree 2 miles east. They leave without orders. No one tries to stop them. Probably the smartest ones among us, Marta says as she watches them disappear into the dust. Meanwhile, Lord Geoffroy is composing a speech, or trying to. You watch him pace in front of his tent, muttering to himself and rewriting the same phrase, a grievous theft against heaven itself, over and over. The final version, delivered just before dusk, is as long as it is unhelpful. He declares the camp must now double its prayers, fast more often, and punish the guilty without mercy. Then he retreats back into his tent and doesn't come out for the rest of the evening. You notice more guards posted that night, real ones this time, swords drawn, armor strapped on properly. They prowl the perimeter like wolves without direction. One tries to search Marta's pack. She lets him, but not before saying, "If you find a saint's toenail in there, I expect it back." No one laughs. The silence is sharp now. Around the fires, people whisper about omens, about plagues and curses and holy wrath. Someone suggests a mass confession. Another suggests a witch trial. A third just mutters, maybe the Turks will return it once they realize it's a toenail. You lie awake longer than usual, your blanket pulled to your chin despite the heat. The stars overhead look colder somehow, distant, like they're watching and not terribly impressed. Historians still argue about the significance of relics during the Crusades, whether they genuinely inspired or merely distracted. But here, in this dry, anxious camp, a missing sliver of bone has done what no battle could, turned unity into suspicion. You close your eyes and try to sleep. Try not to think about fingers pointing, or boots creeping through the dark, or the idea that something so small, so utterly absurd, could carry so much weight. And you wonder, not for the first time, what would happen if someone just made a new one, wrapped a chicken bone in velvet, said a prayer over it, called it holy? Would anyone know? Would anyone care? You never find the answer. The next morning, the relic is still gone, and the siege goes on. The sun crests the horizon with all the gentleness of a slap. You wake up sweating, despite the cool morning breeze, and your first thought is not of relics or sieges or sermons. It's your own smell. You stink. Everyone does, of course. The whole camp reeks. Leather, dust, damp wool, old stew, feet. If the air had a color, it would be gray. It clings to you, settles in your hair, and follows you like a second skin. But today, somehow, it's unbearable. Maybe it's because you haven't changed your tunic in a week. Maybe it's because someone tried to mask their odor with crushed rosemary and only made it worse. Maybe it's because someone nearby threw up from the heat, and it's still there. Whatever the reason, you reach a limit. You need water. Real water. Not to drink. You've had just enough of that to keep your tongue from cracking in half. No. You want to wash, scrub, soak. Even just 5 minutes of feeling like a human being again. You mention it to Marta. She raises an eyebrow. There's a stream about half an hour east, she says. Small, shallow, not exactly a Roman bathhouse, but it'll do. I went last week. You blink. You went last week? She grins. I just didn't tell anyone. Didn't want to share. That's how it begins. You gather your things, a cracked bar of soap that might have once smelled like lavender, a rag that's more whole than cloth, and your only other shirt. Marta leads the way. Her steps light despite everything, as if the promise of cold water is enough to lift her out of the weight of the siege. You pass tents and trenches, step around broken crates, and wave to Agnes, who eyes your bundle and gives you a knowing nod. Don't come back until your hair stops standing on end, she says. The trail is rocky and faint, curving between two low ridges. The air smells different here, more dry grass, less rot. You walk in silence, just breathing, just letting your legs remember what it feels like to move without the weight of a pack or weapon. Then you hear it, a soft trickle, and there it is, a stream, maybe 3 feet wide and barely a foot deep, weaving between a patch of rocks and pale reeds. It's not impressive, but it glistens, it moves, and you would swear it's the most beautiful thing you've seen in weeks. Marta kneels and splashes her face, sighing like a saint at a miracle. You follow suit. The water is cold, sharper than you expected, almost shocking. You gasp as it hits your cheeks, then your neck, then your arms. You don't care. You dunk your hands, rub your face, soak the rag, scrub under your arms, behind your ears, at the nape of your neck. You laugh, out loud. A rare sound these days. Marta throws water at you, and you throw some back. It's ridiculous, childish, pure joy. Then you spot it, a small pool off to the side, where the stream slows and deepens a little. It's not large. It's barely deep enough to sit in, but it's private, shaded. And for the first time since you left your village, you strip down and ease yourself into actual, moving water. It's glorious. The cold bites, but it bites in a kind way, like it's reminding you that you still have a body, that your skin can feel more than just sweat and grit. You dunk your head, letting the water soak through your tangled hair, down your back, into every crevice where dust has lived for far too long. You stay like that for a while, then you regret it, because as you're rinsing your legs, something brushes against your foot. You freeze, then it brushes again, soft, long, and very much alive. You leap out of the water like a man shot from a cannon, gasping and dripping and swearing in at least 3 languages. Marta nearly falls over laughing. She points to the water, where a lazy eel, or maybe a snake, slithers by, utterly indifferent to your panic. You mutter under your breath and pull on your shirt, which is still damp and smells faintly of stale soap. Not perfect, but better. Welcome back to the siege, Marta says, still grinning. The walk back feels different, lighter. Your skin itches slightly from drying sweat, but your hair is soft again. Your limbs feel loose. You almost forget where you are. Then you reach camp and remember. Because the smell hits you like a wall. You hadn't noticed it on the way out, not fully. You'd gotten used to it. But now, with clean skin and fresh clothes, it's unbearable. Like being dunked in a barrel of wet goats. Someone walks past you and sniffs. You smell suspicious, they mutter. You smile and keep walking. Back at your tent, you find your boots have been borrowed. Again, you retrieve them from a nearby campfire, where a boy is using them to prop up a pot. You don't even argue. You just dump out the stew steam, shake your head, and slide them back on. That night, the air feels cooler. Maybe it's just your skin. Maybe it's the wind. Maybe it's nothing at all, just your mind, clean for the first time in days. You lie down on your blanket, damp hair spread out beneath you, and breathe. You smell faintly like mint. You smile. Historians still argue how often Crusaders bathed, whether it was weekly, monthly, or only when dragged into rivers by their friends. But no one talks about what it felt like. That moment when the grime lifts. When you stop being a body at war and become, even for a little while, a person again. A person who laughed. A person who felt the sting of clean water. A person who will never, ever trust a stream again without checking for eels. You wake to the scent of roasting onions, not smoke, not damp wool or stew with too much salt. Actual onions, sweet, sizzling, real. For a moment you think you're dreaming. Then you sit up and see it. A fire ringed with stones, a pan balanced over the flames, and a man turning onions with the flat of his knife. But the man isn't one of yours. He's from their side. Turbaned, calm, focused, no armor, no weapons, just robes and a spatula improvised from a shield fragment. He hums while he cooks. A tune you don't recognize. A tune that doesn't belong on this battlefield. You rub your eyes. Surely this isn't happening. But then you look around and realize something else is different. There are no arrows flying overhead, no shouted orders, no clanging of swords on shields just for intimidation. The watchtowers are quiet. Your commanders, usually shouting about formations or relics or goat theft, are nowhere to be seen. And here, in this absurd stillness, someone hands you a piece of bread. You blink. It's flat, warm, and not moldy. Marta appears beside you, her arms crossed. "It's a truce," she says. "For real this time." You stare. "Since when?" "Since sometime around sunrise," she says. "Both sides needed to gather the dead. Apparently we're all too tired to keep fighting until at least tomorrow." You chew slowly. The bread is delicious. Or maybe you're just surprised it doesn't taste like boot. Across the makeshift clearing, not quite no man's land, not quite friendly ground, small groups begin to appear. Soldiers in mismatched armor, priests from both sides walking in pairs, pointing out burial sites. A man with a lute sits near a cart, tuning it like he's prepping for a feast instead of wandering through a war zone. It's not peace. It's not even safe. But it is something else. A pause. You wander down toward the edge of camp, drawn by the absurdity of it all. There, along the dry gully that once served as the outer trench, Crusaders and enemy soldiers, Muslims, as the priests always hiss, are trading things. Bread for salt, wine for dates, a carved comb for a water skin. One man barters with a handful of arrowheads for a hunk of cheese. Another simply gestures to his boots and raises an eyebrow. The other nods, kicks his off, and they swap. Marta walks beside you, laughing quietly. If Geoffroy knew, he'd have a stroke. Where is he? In his tent, she says, having a theological crisis. Apparently, the truce wasn't his idea. It came from higher up. A message passed through couriers, forged in haste and sealed with too many stamps to argue with. The logic? Bury the dead, rest the horses, rethink the next move, and in that gap of not quite battle, something odd has unfolded. You see a boy, maybe 10, tossing pebbles at a wooden target with a boy from the other side. No language shared, just gestures and laughter. One throws, the other claps. A third joins them with a stick and draws a circle in the dirt. The rules of the game change every minute. No one cares. Further down, a woman is wrapping a soldier's ankle. He winces, but she hums as she works. Her scarf is green. Her touch is precise. She doesn't ask who he fights for. You pass a group of archers playing dice. One wears your colors. The others do not. They laugh like old friends. You wonder if, in another life, they might have been. Then someone hands you a fig, just hands it to you. No words, just a smile and a slight bow. You take it. It's soft, sweet. Possibly the best thing you've eaten since this whole mess began. Back at your part of the camp, Agnes is mending a sandal. I gave 2 rolls of linen to a woman who offered me honey, she says, not looking up. Call it interfaith diplomacy. Lisette is collecting dried herbs, muttering about trading for new dye. Marta's already made 3 deals, one for dried fish, one for needles, and one for a joke that apparently didn't translate but was well received. Someone begins singing, not a war song, not a hymn, just a tune with no words, rising and falling like the wind. It begins with one voice, then 2, then 5. Soon, both camps are humming, like a lullaby, like a spell. Historians still argue whether these truces ever truly happened. Some say they're legend, poetic inventions for a darker age. Others insist there were moments like this. Moments where exhaustion stripped everything down to the basics: food, water, kindness. Just enough humanity to remember that none of you came here to die in a trench surrounded by strangers. That night, you sit by the fire with men you were told to kill, and they sit with you. You try to speak. They try to. Mostly, you point at things. Smile. Raise your eyebrows in shared confusion. You all laugh at the same joke, even though no one understands the punchline. Someone pulls out a battered drum. A rhythm starts. Feet tap. You feel it in your chest. Not fear, not battle rage, just rhythm. The crackle of fire, the rustle of breath, the steady, fragile heartbeat of something almost like peace. Eventually, your visitors rise, one by one, quiet nods, no handshakes, no grand farewells, just understanding. They walk back toward their camp. You watch until the shadows swallow them. Then you turn in for the night, your belly full, your spirit steadier, and your mind swimming in questions. If you meet them again tomorrow, and they raise swords, what then? If the truce ends, do you forget the fig, the song, the boy in the dirt circle? You lie awake longer than usual, unsure what to make of this pause, this strange, beautiful fracture in the chaos. You don't know if it means anything, but you hope it does, because today, nobody died. And that has to count for something. The truce ends with the quietness of a sigh. No trumpets, no speeches, just the slow, inevitable return to the way things were. Sharper glances, hushed orders, weapons unsheathed and oiled once again. The men you laughed with yesterday are ghosts now, drifting beyond the walls. You don't see them again. But something lingers in the air, a shift, a sense that the lines have been redrawn, not just between enemies, but within your own ranks. You're reassigned the next morning. No explanation, just a scroll handed to Lord Geoffroy, a grunt from him, and your name mumbled without eye contact. You're to report to the compound on the northern edge of camp. No further details. You pack your things, which doesn't take long, and head toward the new location. Marta claps you on the shoulder before you leave. If they make you shave your head, demand better soup, she says. You follow a winding path lined with carefully stacked crates, armored sentries, and, strangely, a series of tents that look cleaner, newer. Banners flutter overhead, plain white with a red cross, the symbol of the Knights Templar. The entrance is marked with an arch of wood and canvas, stitched with Latin phrases you can't read. Two men in crisp tunics stand guard, nodding as you approach. One of them gestures wordlessly toward a large tent and steps aside. Inside, it smells like ink and parchment. You expected weapons, strategy boards, maybe training dummies, or at least a few monks chanting about blood and glory. What you find instead are scrolls, dozens, stacked on tables, rolled into baskets, some tied with red string, others sealed with wax. A young man with a quill behind his ear is scribbling numbers into a ledger the size of a tombstone. Another dips a cloth into ink and carefully blots a list that appears to be organized by type of cheese. You clear your throat. The man at the center of the room, broad-shouldered, balding, focused, finally looks up. He wears the white mantle of the Templars, clean and pressed, but his hands are stained with ink. You're the transfer? You nod. Good. We're short on eyes. He doesn't explain what that means, but motions for you to follow. You're led through a maze of paperwork, careful whispers, and what appears to be an active argument over grain measurements. Finally, he hands you a stack of ledgers, a quill, and a small pot of ink. Inventory, he says. Start with the salted meat, and make sure to count the barrels, not the lids. We had a mix-up last week. And just like that, you're a clerk. For the Knights Templar, it takes you 2 hours to figure out the system. Another hour to realize the man who labeled all the dates in the storage tent was either drunk or illiterate. Your fingers cramp from writing. Your back aches from leaning over crates. But you start to find a rhythm. Open, count, record, repeat. During a break, you wander into a side tent where 2 Templars are fitting a new recruit for a tunic. He's nervous, young, and keeps trying to stand taller than he is. One of the knights hands him a dagger and says, "You'll use this less than your pen." Later, you discover the kitchen inventory is more detailed than any battle plan you've ever seen. There are records of lentil distribution, spice weights measured to the grain, and a curious chart comparing soap consumption to morale. You spend part of the afternoon shadowing a Templar named Brother Remy, who oversees logistics. He walks fast, talks faster, and seems to know everything about everyone. He tells you how the Templars act not just as warriors, but as bankers, builders, and record keepers. Without order, he says, we become just another mob with swords. You learn that they track everything, every ration, every coin, every blade sharpened. There are rules about firewood allocation and guidelines for which saints to invoke when approving ledgers. You laugh. He doesn't. Still, something about it appeals to you. The structure, the numbers, the sense that someone, somewhere, is making sense of this chaos. That night, you return to your tent near the Templar compound. It's smaller than your last one, but cleaner. You sit on your cot and flip through one of the ledgers you copied earlier. Rows of entries, meticulously logged, salt, iron, vinegar, candle stubs. It's boring and oddly comforting. You miss Marta's sarcasm, Agnes's scolding, even Jeffroy's baffling plans. But you can feel something changing in you. A shift. As if all the marching and dust and waiting had hollowed out a space in your mind that numbers now quietly fill. The next morning, you're up before sunrise. Brother Remy assigns you to oversee a delivery from a coastal caravan, fabrics, wine, and jars of olive oil sealed with wax. You double-check the manifest, inspect the crates, sign the transfer forms. It feels absurd and important at the same time. In the distance, you hear the clang of weapons, drills resuming after the truce, men shouting, armor scraping. You flinch, not out of fear, but surprise. It feels like a different world now. You still carry your sword. It leans beside your cot, rusting slightly, but your quill never leaves your pocket. Historians still argue whether the Templars were more devout warriors or glorified accountants. You're starting to suspect it's both. They keep the crusade from falling apart, not with swords, but with ink, not with fire, but with order. And maybe that's what real strength looks like. Not the charge, not the blood, but the quiet hand that records who ate, who paid, who was buried, who still matters. That night, you finish your reports, stack them carefully, and slip outside. The stars are bright again, crisp and watchful. You breathe in the cool air and close your eyes. And for the first time in a while, you don't feel lost. You feel counted. You wake up confused. For a moment, everything is quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your ears hum. The cot beneath you is still. The air smells faintly of ash and warmed leather. Your quill, capped neatly, rests beside a closed ledger on the crate you now use as a desk. You blink, once, twice, then the noise hits. Not loud, not the full-body chaos of war, but distant clattering, hurried voices, the unmistakable rhythm of boots slapping packed dirt, the sound of after something. You sit up fast, heart already galloping. You step out of your tent into pale morning light, soft, yellow, indifferent. A few tents are smoldering. A wheelbarrow lies overturned near the supply tent. Its contents, mostly beans, scattered like dropped coins. Someone limps past you holding a helmet shaped like it tried to eat him. You look around. No battle formations. No organized retreat. Just people. Moving, fixing, whispering. What happened? You ask the nearest person, a red-eyed clerk with soot on his cheeks. He blinks. You don't know? You shake your head. He snorts. The Saracens launched a night raid. Around the second watch, hit the southern perimeter, tried to torch the grain stores. You glance at the grain tent, still standing. Did they succeed? He shrugs. Depends. They took a few mules, killed 2 men. We took 5 of theirs. Then it got weird. You frown. Weird? He gestures vaguely. They left in a hurry, like it wasn't about victory, like they were just reminding us they could. You stand there, stunned. You slept through it, all of it, a full-fledged skirmish, inside the very camp. while you were tucked beneath your wool blanket, snoring next to an ink pot. You find Marta later, seated beside a broken cart, bandaging her own hand. She looks up and smirks. "Nice of you to join us." You groan. "Please don't." "Oh, I won't mock you," she says. "Much. But I will point out that your tent flap was still buttoned this morning. Not a speck of dust on your boots." You sit beside her, face in your hands. You begin, but she waves you off. "You needed the sleep. Everyone does. Just maybe not during a raid." She gestures toward a soldier pacing nearby. "That guy slept through it too. Didn't even wake up when his shield got knocked over. Apparently, he dreams of waterfalls and couldn't tell the difference." You laugh, and then quickly stop when your stomach clenches with guilt. But the truth is, you did need the sleep. You'd been operating like a half-dried sponge for days. Numbers, inventory, half-spoken orders. They filled your head, pressed against your ribs. Maybe your body simply gave out. Still, you missed it. Not that you wanted to fight, but you'd prepared for it, cleaned your blade, kept your armor polished, if unused. In the back of your mind, you'd imagined yourself rising to the moment. And instead, you were unconscious, dreaming of moss and candlelight. Later that day, Lord Geoffroy re-emerges from whatever tent he'd been hiding in during the skirmish. He holds a staff now, as if to appear more commanding, but it's clearly just a broom handle with the bristles cut off. He gives a speech about vigilance, about valor, about the need for constant, unwavering awareness in the face of the enemy. You stare at him. He slept through it, too. You're sure of it. Rumor has it his squire found him snoring under a pile of cloaks, unaware his personal tent had nearly caught fire. But no one says this aloud. It wouldn't help. And, truthfully, everyone is too tired to care. The camp is quieter today. Not somber, exactly, but dulled. Like a bell that's been rung too many times. You find yourself helping reorganize crates knocked loose during the fight. Olive oil leaked over a few scrolls. Some grain sacks tore open. You salvage what you can, re-record the counts, and patch up the manifest. The rhythm is steady, comforting. That night, a few men sit around a fire recounting the raid. Exaggerations come quickly. One swears he held off 6 attackers with a spoon. Another claims he wrestled a Saracen to the ground and converted him mid-fight. You don't say much. You listen. But later, alone, you sit at your little desk and begin writing. Not a ledger, not an inventory, just a few lines. You describe the firelight, the sound of shouts, the tension of sleep turning to fear. You imagine what it would have felt like, what it must have felt like. The clash, the confusion, the brief, terrifying intimacy of battle. And then, without planning to, you write about dreaming, about how the brain can trick you into thinking you're safe, how it builds quiet rooms in the middle of war zones, how, sometimes, that's the only way to keep going. Historians still argue about what counts as participation in war. Who fought? Who supported? Who simply survived? They rarely mention the ones who slept through the moment, the ones whose bodies betrayed them or protected them, depending on your perspective. You lie in bed, blanket up to your chin, sword within arm's reach. You listen. No sounds of alarm tonight. No clatter, no horns, just the low murmur of a distant lullaby, someone singing again, soft and slow. You close your eyes, and this time, you stay half awake. Not because you're afraid, but because you want to hear everything. even the silence. The next morning, you stare at your reflection in a dented metal cup filled with water. Just a ripple of a face, dirt in the creases, eyes like worn leather, a beard that's trying but failing to look intentional. You swish the water once, then pour it over your head. It's cold, and for a moment, you feel awake. Then you remember where you are. Not the camp, not the siege, but this moment. This stretch of slow-burning time where everything feels both too much and not enough. Where every morning arrives at the same question rising in the back of your throat. Why are we even here? Not in the grand, glorious sense. You know the sermon answers. You've heard them all. From Geoffroy's lazy proclamations to that monk who smells like onions and always says divine fire with too much breath. No, your question is smaller, quieter. Why are you here? This exact patch of dirt. These days filled with spreadsheets and burnt soup and stolen mules. This war that doesn't seem to want to end and doesn't seem to want to begin. Either. You spend the morning auditing a shipment of nails, 3 crates of bent iron, half rusted, counted one by one in the shadow of a siege that has now lasted so long the tents have names. You find yourself staring at one nail in particular, twisted, nearly broken, useless even to the most optimistic blacksmith. You set it aside, pick up another, keep going. Marta passes by around noon, holding a jug that leaks slightly. Want to hear something hilarious? She asks. You nod. They sent a letter to Rome requesting more parchment, she says, eyes wide. We are running out of parchment in a war. You laugh, but it dies halfway. Later, you help Remy adjust the manifest for the camp's growing laundry supplies. The Templars, he mutters, are very particular about linen. He doesn't look up as he says it. You admire his ability to file a report and question reality simultaneously. By mid-afternoon, someone loses a donkey. Not in battle, just loses it, wandering, a valuable beast of burden gone missing. You're pulled from inventory to help search. It becomes the most active thing you've done in days. You don't find the donkey. You do find a man arguing with a tree. He insists the tree is cursed. You do not ask why. Instead, you sit on a stone and watch the camp shuffle through another day of meaninglessness disguised as duty. Supplies are passed out. Water is fetched. Bread is chewed. Someone sharpens a sword they'll probably never use. Someone else tries to patch a torn tent flap with a relic pouch. The relic's long gone, and you walk back to your cot, feet dragging, hands still stained with ink, and feel the question tighten again. Why are we here? The night brings wind, sharp, insistent, tugging at the tents like a bored cat. You lie awake, cloak over your head, trying to sleep while your neighbor mutters in his dreams about turnips. You get up, walk the perimeter. The watchman barely notices you. He's busy humming to himself and carving a fish into the handle of his spear. It's surprisingly detailed. You pass by the medical tent. Someone's coughing. Someone else is praying. A woman is singing, softly, sweetly, off-key. You pause to listen. Then you keep walking. At the far edge of camp, the city's silhouette looms in the dark, the same as ever, silent, unmoving, still lit with the occasional torch. You wonder if they ask themselves the same thing inside those walls. Why are they still here? You think about home, not with longing, just curiosity, the memory of it, your mother's soup, your father's old boots, your brother, probably still stealing things. You wonder if they talk about you like you're a hero, or if they've simply stopped mentioning your name. You sit on a rock and wait. Not for anything in particular, just because waiting feels like the only honest thing left to do. Historians still argue about the goals of the Crusades. Some say it was conquest, others, redemption, politics, trade, power, glory, faith, survival. No one talks about the boredom. No one writes about the days that blur, the nothing mornings, the nothing afternoons, the long stretch of time between intentions and action, where belief shrinks and routine expands. You lean back, staring at the stars. They're brighter here, unfiltered, maybe because there's nothing left to reflect them. Marta finds you again, dropping beside you with a sigh. "You okay?" she asks. You nod, then pause. "Do you ever wonder what this is all for?" "All the time," she replies without hesitation. Usually while peeling onions. You both stare at the horizon, where nothing changes. Then she says, "I used to think we were here to fight, but now I think we're here because no one wants to be the first to leave." You nod again. That, at least, makes sense. She stands, stretches. Come on. Someone's trying to bake flatbread without flour, and it's going to be hilarious. You follow, not because it will be funny, but because it's something. That night, you sleep lightly, you dream of roads, of maps that lead back to questions instead of places. You wake before dawn and write it down. Just a few lines, scribbled in the margin of a manifest. Purpose, unclear. Mission, stalling. Morale, questionable. Reason for staying, TBD. You close the book, stretch your hands, and step back into another day of waiting. You don't remember when the orders came. One morning, they were just there, scribbled on parchment, stamped with the wax seal of someone who hadn't stepped foot in your camp since the first frost. A command, not a request. Your battalion, such as it is, will begin the return journey within the week. No reason is given. There never is. Some say a new front has opened in the north. Others whisper that the Pope has shifted his attention. A few optimists claim the war is over. You don't believe that. You just know you've been told to go. Pack up. Take what you can carry, and march back the way you came. The announcement spreads through camp like spilled wine, quickly, messily, staining everything it touches. Some cheer, others weep, a few argue. Geoffroy disappears into his tent for the better part of a day, then re-emerges with a forced smile and declares the retreat an honorable repositioning. No one corrects him. You don't know how to feel. Relief, maybe, or something like it, wrapped tightly in fatigue, but also a strange, aching grief. You've hated this place, but you've known it. Every cracked tent pole, every familiar boot print in the mud, every face, tired and burned and real. Now you have to leave. You spend your last days doing what you always did, counting, sorting, writing, inventories, logs, personal effects left behind, a tunic with no owner, a cup carved with initials no one recognizes, an extra pair of socks that might have once been yours. You sit at your desk, cross-legged, and scribble out numbers that no longer matter. But you finish every column, you total every line, because even in retreat, things should be recorded. Brother Remy comes by and shakes your hand. "You kept it standing," he says. "I just wrote things down." Exactly. Packing is chaos. No one knows what to bring. Supplies are limited. Wagons have broken wheels. Some horses are lame, others stolen. You cram your few belongings into a satchel that now feels heavier than it did months ago. Your sword, still dull. A small pouch of coins. The quill Marta gave you. A folded piece of parchment with your name. In case you're found. Marta finds you before departure. She's dirty, grinning, and holding a piece of flatbread that's only slightly burnt. I thought I'd never get out of here, she says. And now I'm not sure I want to. You don't know what to say, so you just nod. Agnes is staying, she adds. You blink. Why? Says she's needed. There are still wounded, still mouths to feed. You look toward the chapel tent where Agnes is already retying bundles of herbs, her brow furrowed in focus. She doesn't even look up. Marta nudges your arm. Don't lose that face of yours. You worked hard to keep it together. You smile, barely. No promises. Then you go. The first few miles are strange. Your legs move automatically, but your mind doesn't catch up. The rhythm of the march returns. Boots crunching gravel, gear shifting, water sloshing in half-filled skins. But it feels backward now. Wrong. The sun is on your other shoulder. The wind hits differently, and no one sings. You pass places you recognize, though they've changed. That old bridge, burned. The fig grove, cut down. A stream you once washed in is now barely a trickle, choked with mud and ashes. A week in, someone dies, not in battle, just collapses mid-step. No fever, no wounds, just stops. His name is never clear. His body is buried beneath a cairn of stones piled quickly and without ceremony. You say nothing, no one does. You lose 3 more before you reach the borderlands. A boy goes missing after slipping down a ravine. A mule tramples its handler in panic. One woman simply sits down beneath a tree and never gets up again. Her friend stays with her body for a day before catching up, eyes hollow. This is what going home looks like. You ration food. You make camp in silence. You wake at dawn and sleep at dusk. The land changes slowly, less dry, more green, but it doesn't feel like hope yet. It feels like exhaustion in a new color. And then, one morning, after a cold night with no fire, you crest a hill and see it. Your homeland, or something close. Not your village, not yet, but land that smells familiar. Sky that bends the right way. Trees that look like memories. You want to cry? You don't. You keep walking. It takes 2 more weeks before you finally arrive. Your village is smaller than you remember. The buildings squat and tired. The fields half-harvested. A dog barks from a doorway. Someone looks up from a bench and doesn't recognize you. You look like a ghost. You feel like one, too. You walk to your family's home. It's still standing. The door creaks. The scent of herbs and old ash clings to the walls. Your mother is older. Your brother taller. They stare at you like a dream. Not quite sure if they should speak. You don't explain everything. You can't. Instead, you sit, you eat, you sleep. You try. Weeks pass, then months. You take work in the village storehouse. Of course. What else would you do? You count. You tally. You weigh. You organize sacks of grain with the same care you once gave to rations and crossbow bolts. Sometimes you wake at night, convinced you hear the snap of a tent flap, the crackle of stew burning, the quiet lull of someone singing to themselves beyond the firelight. You miss it. Not all of it, but pieces. You think about writing it all down. the full story, the dust, the fights, the eel in the stream, the night you slept through the battle, the fig, the relic, the map in your head that always pointed south. Historians will debate the crusade, the politics, the miracles, the victories, the failures, but they'll never write about your socks, or the way Marta laughed with her whole chest, or how Agnes never flinched at blood, or how a missing toenail nearly destroyed a camp. You remember it all because someone should, because it mattered, even if it didn't change the world. You place your final tally into the grain ledger, close the book, and set it gently on the shelf. You survived, and that, for now, is enough. Your days are slower now. The rhythm has changed. No morning horns, no shouted orders, no counting arrows in the half-dark. Instead, there's the sound of wind moving through barley, the creak of your chair as you shift your weight, and the soft scratch of a quill against paper. Yes, you're still writing. Your work in the village storehouse grew into something else. A quiet role, half clerk, half listener. People bring you things, receipts, supply lists, odd family accounts. But they also bring you stories. An old woman who swears her turnips are stolen by ghosts. A shepherd who insists one of his sheep has learned to climb trees. You never dismiss them. You write them down. Sometimes they remind you of your old camp. And sometimes, more often than you admit, you take out the worn little bundle from beneath your bed. Inside are scraps from another life, a corner of Templar linen, a flat stone with your name etched in dull charcoal, a letter from Marta on stolen parchment. You reread her note every few weeks. She went farther west, found a husband who bakes, apparently. She jokes that she married for bread, not love. You smile when you read that part. Agnes never wrote. You expected she wouldn't. She was always too grounded to carry memories for long. But you dream of her sometimes. Not in detail, just her silhouette in firelight, humming under her breath, her hands never still. You still sharpen your sword once a month. It's more rust than blade now, tucked in a corner behind your pantry. But the motion calms you. A memory of muscle. A practice in honoring what once mattered. You don't plan to use it, but you haven't let it go. One morning, a traveler passes through your village, a younger man, with wild hair and that look, the one you used to wear before the dirt and the years filed it down. He asks if you've ever fought. You hesitate, then nod. He asks if it was glorious. You shake your head. Then you surprise yourself by inviting him in for tea. You tell him a little, just a little, about the camp, about the maps that made no sense and the time someone tried to roast figs with soap. You don't mention the blood or the silence afterward. You don't need to. He listens, wide-eyed. At the end, he says, "But was it worth it?" You pour more tea and say nothing. He doesn't push. Later that night, you walk through the fields, the sky above wide and gentle. The stars are where they should be, and the ground doesn't shake with marching feet. And yet, the crusade lives in you still, not as a scar, not even as a pride, just a quiet room in your mind where the dust never quite settles, where names echo softly. Geoffroy, Marta, Agnes, Remy, each carrying a weight that history books never measured. You wonder if they remember you, too, if their nights are ever interrupted by half-dreams of oil lamps and distant bells. Historians still argue what the Crusades achieved. Who won? Who lost? What shifted? They write of kings and councils, battles and treaties, of relics stolen, cities burned, alliances formed in blood and shattered by greed. But none of them write about the quiet, the long pauses between wars, the way your hands keep counting long after the numbers stop mattering, the peculiar ache of returning home and realizing you left something behind that doesn't quite have a name, the weight of surviving when others didn't, the guilt of sleeping through a battle, the simple, impossible task of deciding what parts of you are still yours. One evening, a child runs into your storehouse, dirty-cheeked, loud, breathless, asking if you've seen her goat. You help her look, not because it's your job, but because something about her voice reminds you of the young recruit who couldn't tie his own sandals. You never did learn his name. You find the goat under a wagon. She laughs, thanks you, then dashes off. And just like that, the crusade fades a little more. Another week passes, then another. Seasons change. Your beard turns gray at the edges. You develop a limp from a cold that never healed right. But you still write, still track, still notice. You keep a small journal now, not official records, just thoughts. You write about clouds, about the way dust settles, about figs, always the figs. Sometimes, when no one's watching, you sketch the camp, rough shapes, lines that wobble. You remember where the tent stood, who slept where the soup always boiled over. You label it temporary city, because that's what it was, and somehow still is. And then, one spring morning, you close the book. You look out across the fields. The wind moves gently. Your heart is steady. You survived the crusade. You came home. But the crusade never really left you, because memory is a kind of marching, soft, unending, full of dust and song and silence. You smile, just slightly, and return to your desk. You have one last thing to write. Now that our long journey is done, let your thoughts grow quiet. The fires have all burned down. The tents are packed away. The swords are sheathed, and the ledgers closed. You've walked miles through dust, through silence, through uncertainty. And yet, somehow, you made it home, not just in the story, but here, in this soft moment at the edge of sleep. Breathe in gently. You're no longer marching, no longer counting supplies, or wondering who you'll become when the fighting ends. You are simply here, wrapped in stillness. The stars are unchanged. The wind has calmed, and the weight on your shoulders can finally be set down. Maybe you've carried more than you realized, not just memories of battles and names, but thoughts that never stopped marching, long after the war did. Now is the time to let those thoughts settle. Let the camp fade. Let the torches burn out. Let the sound of distant footsteps melt into nothing but the soft rhythm of your own breathing. You've seen enough. You've done enough. You are enough. And as the last flickers of this tale drift into quiet, know that history will wait. It always does. For now, rest. Good night.